Welcome to Collegial Conversations with Diana Clark, the professional webinar series that offers clinical and personal perspectives on issues that are common, but often not talked about. Here is today's Collegial Conversation.
Thank you for joining a Collegial Conversation with Diana Clark. Joining Diana today is Ted Miller. Ted is both a transformational coach and instructor of social emotional learning courses for adolescents. He has designed and implemented curriculums to help teens develop and strengthen their emotional intelligence skills. Diana and Ted today will be discussing adolescent mental health and the prevalence of anxiety amongst adolescents and teens. Thank you so much for joining us today, Ted. I'm going to pass the conversation to Diana.
Thank you, Laura. And Ted Miller, it is wonderful to have you on this show. I've known you for, I think it's a decade at this point. I met you very early on in your journey, and now we are fast forwarding or slow forwarding, as the case may be, depending on who you are, a decade or 11 years later. So would you be open enough to talk about how you and I met, and then we can move into the last decade?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think what sort of brought me into your world, I've been sober myself for this May will be 12 years. So when I was 23 years old, I got sober, and I had struggled, I'm not going to go into my entire past, but I'd struggled for years, all through my teens, early 20s with drugs and alcohol. And that was a major challenge for me. And so by the time I was 23, I'd tried treatment before, I had tried therapy, I'd tried everything. I finally, for whatever reason, the most recent time when I was 23, I went back to inpatient treatment center. I just kind of got it. And that was sort of what brought our worlds together. At the time, I had met Chris O'Connor, Arden's brother, and Chris and I became close friends. We met in treatment, and we got sober together, lived in a sober house together, an apartment together. And then around, I don't remember what year OPG started, but it was sort of in the, maybe, 2011, 2012, something like that. 11. Okay. Yeah. Shortly after Arden created OPG, I had sort of, I think that's what brought us together, is I started doing some part-time case management and stuff back, over 10 years ago.
Yeah. And a lot has happened in those 10 years. So I loved hearing your resume, or your bona fides, as they say on NPR, however they say it, about what you're doing these days. You came from your own story and your own struggle, and now you are working with the same age population, basically, as the beginning of your struggle. So tell me how that influences how you work with teens and what you're seeing with the teenage population right now. And first, what do you do so that people know this? Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. So I have a few hats. I work as a wellness coach with OPG. I just kind of got back into doing work with OPG. And so I'm doing some one-on-one coaching. I would say my main focus of my career right now is I'm working at a boarding school in Connecticut called Hotchkiss. And I'm working there. I spent years working in the counseling center, and now I'm primarily teaching classes in human development. And so essentially that's classes on, social emotional learning, classes on emotional intelligence, mental health, drugs and alcohol. It's a required course for all 9th and 10th graders. And we're sort of in the progress of building it out so all 11th and 12th graders have it as well. It's very much, health, wellness, mental health, emotional intelligence, and sort of sitting down with the kids in a circle and talking about life. Some of the kids call it group therapy, it's fun. It's good. It's awesome work. And, in terms, I think the other question was, I believe you asked, how does sort of my past, what I went through, influence the work I'm doing now with adolescents? Is that what you'd asked?
Yes.
Yeah. And I would say it does so tremendously. I come from the school I work at is a very high pressure, high achieving, the students, it's hard to get into, very competitive. It's only 600 students. We have thousands of applications every year. And the kids who get in tend to be really high achieving kids who often come from families that put a lot of pressure on them to get all A's and go to Ivy League schools. And a lot of the people, I think the school does a very good job in recognizing mental health and the needs to kind of take care of the whole child. I also work with a lot of people who don't necessarily have the same background that I do, struggling with the, the mental health, the drugs and alcohol components. So I come from, I don't teach an academic class, the people who, I have a lot of colleagues who went to Harvard and come from a very rigorous academic background. I come from a much more, like, for me, the most important thing when I'm working with kids is their happiness, is that that's so much more important than them getting all A's, is that, are they feeling like they are well adjusted? Are they feeling that they can handle the day-to-day challenge of life, the social stressors, all that kind of stuff. So I'm so much more focused on like their well-being than like getting into Harvard, if that makes sense.
I was reading a book called The Self-Driven Child. You may have read it, by Strickson. And he talks about certain fallacies that parents in this generation are living under. And one is that in order to be successful, a kid needs to go to an Ivy League school.
Yeah.
Two, that the more we push and the more we pressure, the better the kids do, which is also a fallacy.
Yeah.
And that, I'm trying to remember the third one. The third expectation was something like, if they fall off the trajectory, they will never get back on.
Yes.
So I have those in one of my slide decks for parents, because I think it's really important. We're terrified as parents that our kids are going to fall off this escalator and somehow never be able to get back on. Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I see that all the time with parents that I deal with, and with the kids I work with, their parents. And, I truly see that all the time. And, I find that if I think about the students that I've worked with over the years, the ones who are really thriving, a lot of them have had many major challenges throughout their years at school, mental health, academic, failed exams, had to repeat a year, these things that feel like it's literally the end of the world. We have kids who, they leave on mental health leave and they come back the next year and they're in the same grade, or they're repeating the same year. And it feels like your life is over. And, the parents are often really concerned too. And oftentimes these are the kids that learn the most and grow the most, right? It's these failures that happen that are really what teach us the most important lessons that we need to learn. And some parents, I think, do a really good job of that. So I'm sometimes very impressed with some of the parents I work with. They come from a very holistic, reference point where they understand this, but certainly there are many who don't at all. And they're very concerned that, oh my God, so-and-so got a C on her first math exam. Yale is going to see this. She's done, right? I mean, I see stuff like that all the time. And, so yeah, I think that those three fallacies that you broke down are pretty accurate. It tends to be the failures that cause the most growth and success. And if there is a student who somehow slips through with perfect grades and perfect everything, there's something else waiting to bubble up in another area of their life. There just is.
Because we're all human. So what kinds of struggles are you seeing? I mean, high expectation, high achievement, high internalized pressure in order to have gotten there. What's the cost of that kind of expectation?
Yeah. I would say it's truly different for everybody. I can't, we have 600 students, 600 plus, 600 unique personalities. So it really manifests differently for everybody. I would say some of the pretty standard examples I see are a lot of anxiety, just very high anxiety. When I think of some of the really high, our school in general is some, high achieving kids, but we also, within that, there's a spectrum. There's some kids who are really like they're top of the top of the top. And the ones who are really trying to get into Harvard, Yale, and the ones who do, a lot of anxiety. I mean, they're really working themselves from, our day starts from, classes start at 8:30. They go until 3:30. We have sports from 4 to 6. Then we have dinner. Then the lower classmen from 8 to 10 have study hall. I mean, it's never ending. And for the kids who are really trying to get perfect scores, like they are all day, every day. And I think the biggest thing is anxiety. Really, a lot of constantly checking my emails. Did a teacher email me? Is this assignment in at the same, like they're really focused, and burnout, anxiety and burnout. Like the kids are exhausted. We go to school 6 days a week. We have classes on Saturdays, right? And it's a half day, but Sunday is the only day that they have to really decompress. And then for a lot of them, they just need to catch up on work. And then all the additional, clubs on top of, they start clubs and varsity sports. And so I would say just a strong sense of anxiety is the number one thing I see amongst a spectrum of others.
So in your therapy group or your curriculum, how do you guys address in a boarding school culture where you are going to school 6 days a week and they're working all day long without fail, or they fail? How do you address that in that context?
Yeah, so I think one of the our classes seek to develop what we refer to as social emotional learning skills, emotional intelligence. And so sort of there's 5 tenets to that. I don't want to ramble too long, but just quickly, it's self-awareness, self-management, right? Like being able to manage your feelings, social awareness, being aware of other people, relationship skills, managing relationships, and responsible decision making. And so we try to hit all 5 of those competencies. And I would say the way we do that is through lots of starting off with just sitting in a circle, right? I generally have 10 to 12 kids in my class. We go around, how's life? What's going good? What's going well? What's not going so good? What are your successes? What are the struggles? Everyone just taking a turn to sort of express like where they're at right now. That in of itself, they don't do that in math class. They don't do that in physics, right? Like just that space to focus on like, how are we feeling right now? And then from that, we have different topics every week, but doing various self-reflections, I'll have them sometimes we'll do anonymous self-reflections. Like what is the number one thing you're struggling with in social relationships right now? We have a note card and everyone anonymously writes down, all using pencils on a note card, the number one thing they're struggling with. And it could be any topic, right? Take the note cards, mix them up, shuffle back out, read out, right? So people get a sense, because sometimes when you ask someone in a group of their peers, what are you struggling with in social relationships? Everyone wants to be like, oh, I'm perfect. I'm cool. I'm nothing. When you do it anonymously, right, you get to read it out, and a lot of the kids are nodding their heads. And so we do a lot of self-reflection, getting in pairs, small groups, and just talking about life, talking about the challenges of boarding school, and sort of just creating that space. And then over the weeks, they get stronger, more comfortable in that, and it sort of continues to develop from there.
So I would imagine that what you're doing in addition to providing a curriculum about social and emotional well-being is you're really fostering intimate connections in those rooms that may never have happened otherwise.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's the number one. Maybe not the number one, maybe it is the number one. One of the single most important things that we're doing in this class is creating a space for connection, right? A real connection where, where kids can they sort of can. I was going to say sort of take off the mask that they wear. It's always there a little bit, you're an adolescent in high school, but just sort of creating a space where we've sort of allowed students to open up a little bit more. You start to see that, and peers start to see the other side of their friends that they might not have seen otherwise. And so definitely, creating that space for connection, that is really at the heart of everything that, my classes do.
So I want to ask you a tough question. Let's talk about EQ for a minute. Emotional. Yeah. Is that an inborn trait? Is that learned? Is that fluid throughout life? Can it be learned?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I would say, in my experience, it's something that some people are definitely naturally better at than others. You can't, that's just a fact. I have sometimes I have students come in and I'm like, wow, this person has a really high EQ. I can tell by the way that they kind of read the room, they wait their turn to kind of speak, that there's a natural ability to that for sure. And then on the other side of that, I have the kids who come in and they're just talking over everyone, and they need this class a lot. And so I would say that it definitely in my experience, there's some innateness to it, a lot of innateness to it, but for sure through having these conversations, letting people know what EQ is, showing examples of good EQ, listening to people with a high EQ, I know students can definitely develop it. I see it all the time, but there definitely is that set point.
Do you think that those kids you see with what looks like natural EQ were taught younger by their parents the things that you're teaching later?
Yes, for sure. And I hear that too. Oftentimes the students that I'm really impressed with, I hear them refer back to things that their parents taught them. I just had an example the other day that there's this student who she's a ninth grade and she's so sharp. And so I could just tell, this girl like gets it, she was just really, and I remember we were actually talking about EQ and she was saying she always remembers from a young age, her parents telling her EQ is so much more important than IQ. EQ is so much more important than IQ. And even when she went to this school, remember that, and so I see that for sure. And I definitely think from a young age that their parents likely had a high EQ and they're also relaying the importance of that to them. And then on the other hand, I see the kids who are much more, this is a foreign concept to them. And they've never even heard this term in their mind, like how good I am at math, how good I am at physics, whether or not I go to MIT, like that's what matters. And that's what their parents are telling them too. So I think for sure there's an innateness to it. And there's also a cyclical nature of like where the parents are coming from and what they're instilling in their children.
So if you were going to boil down 3 pieces of advice, I know I'm asking a really tough question here.
I love it. It's great.
For parents, let's say, of young children, 4, 2, and 8 months like you, what are the like sort of core principles you would want to instill in your children and as parents that you would want to display?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say the first one that stands out to me would be to, let your child discover what it is that they're into and who they are, rather than telling them you need to be a strong math student and become a doctor or a lawyer. I mean, I still hear that all the time. Like we go around and ask students, and some of them might really actually want to be a doctor, lawyer, banker. And there's nothing wrong with that, but they all seem to want that, or many of them do. And I get the sense from a lot of them that there's this pressure from their parents for them to do that. And so I think the students I see who are most well-adjusted are the ones who are most strongly in tune with themselves, and they know what excites them. They know they're learning who they are. I can't expect a ninth grader to fully know all about themselves and who they are, but they're really in tune with what is right for them versus what's right. What do I think society wants from me? What do I think my parents want from me? So the number one piece would be, let the students explore like what their natural tendencies are, what their strengths are, what their weaknesses are, and let them kind of have their own process. And sort of number 2, along with that, it's sort of almost the same thing, but give them the chance to have their process and not inserting yourself into trying to fix everything for them. That's the other problem we often run into is like the helicopter parents, right? Who believe that it's their job to protect their student, protect their child from any form of stress or anxiety. And I think we're definitely seeing that on the rise. I mean, so we have some parents who are so involved with, their students' lives, and there's nothing wrong with that, but you're not giving them a chance to grow and to learn and to fail. And that's like the most important thing they can have. Like I was talking about earlier, is having those failures, having those times where they fell short and they learn from themselves rather than the parents trying to do it all for them. So I would say number 1,
right? You can't run for somebody. You can't learn how to tie a shoe for somebody. You cannot develop resilience for somebody else.
Yeah, exactly. Letting them have their own experience, right? I think that the parents are taking so much away. Ironically, they think they're helping, but it's causing so much harm when they're trying to just take the child's natural experience away from them. Yeah. And then 3, God, what would number 3 be? I think to just trust in their process, to trust that, I'm very much, I believe that things come into our lives for a reason. Everything's there to be used. Everything's there to learn from. And that whatever happens, we can grow from that. We can learn from that, and that it's there for a reason. And so for whatever's coming up in their lives, to just trust and understand that this is their path unfolding. And the challenges that are there are exactly the ones that need to be there for them to take the next steps that they need to take to get where they need to go, rather than like, oh my God, we need to turn around and alter course. Like, no, just trust. Just have a trust that things are going to unfold, because they always do. And it's when we interject is when it makes it worse, right? So just sort of like relax a little bit and know that they're going to be okay. Even if they don't go to Harvard, they're going to be more than okay.
Right. There's a big wide world of people who didn't go to Harvard.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So what didn't I ask you today as we wrap up? What didn't I ask you that you would love for our audience to know?
Gosh, why did you not ask me? I don't know. I guess there's a couple things that I don't want to be so, I guess I'll say 2 things. I don't want to be so, on the one hand, I would say I am definitely noticing we had years of COVID, and I've had a lot of students who have legitimately said that they spent 2 years on Zoom, right? And not in-person classes. Not everyone. Some people, their schools were open, but I've had a handful of students that I had 2 years of sitting in front of a computer on Zoom for middle school. And so we're definitely noticing a developmental delay. Not in everybody, but there's some students who it's noticeable. They had a normal 6th grade, then 7th and 8th grade, they're on Zoom, and now they're in high school. And it's like, you can see this sort of developmental delay from that. I would say on the other hand, I'm just so continually impressed with the kids that I work with, right? I don't want to we're talking about all this bad, negative stuff, but these are some truly just amazing kids. And I'm always thinking about what great things they're going to do in the world. And there's such a bright side to all this negativity we're talking about, where, the kids are on their phones, social media all the time, but a lot of them are taking in positive stuff and just learning, and just I don't know, I'm really blown away. I compare, when I was in high school, the things I cared about, I don't know. I just see some of these kids, I'm like, they're ready to change the world. And I don't know, when I was there, I don't know what the hell I was doing.
So ran for president, let alone know the policies of the environmental, change.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know. They're just, I'm really impressed with a lot of them, despite all this, what I just said about developmental delays. On the other hand, I see a lot of truly impressive kids who just have so much heart and spirit and are so loving and so open. We have a lot of openly transgender, openly gay students, openly, the level of acceptance that I see in the school I work at is light years beyond when I was in high school 20 years ago. It is literally light years beyond that. And it's really inspiring and hopeful and exciting for me.
Yay. I love hearing that. They are way more accepting of difference than certainly in my generation, but even in yours. Interesting to hear. So, well, I appreciate you joining me today, Ted Miller, and I wish you luck really with all of the kids that you impact on a daily basis, including your own.
Oh, well, thank you, Diana. Thank you for having me. I love talking about this, and I really appreciate being a part of this and sharing some of my thoughts. So thank you.
Thank you for joining this webinar. Tune in to more webinars and sign up for our newsletter at o'connorpg.com.